Hey guys, thanks for joining. We're going to get this started in a little bit. We're just going to let a few more people funnel in to the webinar. Bit of housekeeping before we get started. Up at the top right-hand corner, you'll see a couple of tabs there. The main one that I want you to focus on is the question mark tab. It says questions on it when you hover over it. That's where you're going to be able to interact with the webinar. So if any questions come up during the webinar, we're going to try to answer them at the end so they don't get kind of bogged down while we're going through the content that we wanted to cover. But make sure you get your question in there. We'll do our best to get it answered at the end of the webinar. And if not, at the very least, we'll reach out afterwards. See a few more people coming in. Maybe while we're sitting here, I want to kind of test out, see if this is working. You guys want to? I'd like to understand where people are calling in from. If you want to put, city, state, province. Good to know where people are coming. Again, you're going to be putting that into the questions tab. It's a question mark icon up at the top right-hand portion of the webinar window. Got some from Washington State, Victoria. Cool. Also interested, is this your first time joining us for a webinar? We host about 2 a quarter. If you're new to this is your first webinar that you attended that we've put on, maybe put new in the chat, or if you've been to multiple, how many you've been to. It'd be great to see. We've got some returning webinar attendees or a bunch of newbies. So feel free to put that into the chat as we go. Again, I'll do one more just before we get started here. We're about 2 minutes in. I want to just let you know, question tab up at the top right-hand corner. That's what we're going to be using. If any questions come up or we ask you for some feedback throughout the webinar, you're going to use that question tab up at the top. The chat doesn't work, so make sure that you're putting it into that question tab. I think we'll get started here. Thanks for joining us, guys. Our webinar topic for today is something that a lot of times I feel like gets overlooked. It's not maybe the sexiest topic, but it's extremely important, especially if we're wanting to maximize our bottom line. And then the title for today's webinar is Assessing and Avoiding the Cost of Downtime, Protect Your Uptime, Preserve Your Margins. One sec here. There we go. Speakers. So we've got myself. I'm Matt Erickson, one of the co-founders of Evolved. I'm the senior sales executive. And we've got Dustin Powers, one of the founding members of UBM Advisors. You may know him from Future 4200. And we're going to be going through all of this great content with some cool tools that we're actually going to share with you guys at the end as well. So make sure you stay to the end. We've got some really cool tools that you'll be able to implement into your facilities.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Dustin. Thanks for the intro, Matt. So as he said, today we're going to kind of go through some of the reasons we have downtime and how and why we might try to avoid them. So we're going to, just start off with this opening impact. We're going to kind of figure out where people are with their own downtime, whether you've assessed it or not, how that might impact you. Then we're going to move into kind of like 4 specific buckets that we throw types of downtime in, and there's a couple in there that you might not have thought about that we are excited to show you because we've been through them in the worst possible way. And then we're going to kind of show you how to accurately calculate that. We've built some tools to help with that. And then we're going to move into how to implement all the stuff that we've just talked about into your business. And we've got a few more tools for you there as well. And then at the end, we'll show you guys how to get access to all those tools to use yourself. And we'll go into an involved question and answer session. So go ahead and, as we're going through today, drop your questions into the chat. We'll accumulate them, and we will, for the most part, answer them all at the end together.
Awesome. So we'll start with a quick poll here. Just want to understand, first of all, if you have experienced downtime or you've suspected, you're trying to plan for some downtime, what has, or what do you think would create the most downtime at your facility? So if you want to use that question chat, feel free to enter it there. We've got a poll here, so you can should be able to see that popped up on your screen. Enter that in. Got a few for mechanical unplanned failures, supply regularities, changeover, clean in place. Cool. All right. Looks like majority of them, and kind of unsurprisingly, are the mechanical and unplanned failures. I think that's where everybody goes when you originally think of downtime is, hey, if this part breaks, I'm going to be down. So that's definitely the case, but there's a lot of other components that kind of hidden costs and cascading costs and effects on your business that that happen or are very easily overlooked. And that's where we kind of want to make sure that we're highlighting in today's webinar. I'm gonna end that. Dustin, you want to talk about anything on this slide, or should we skip to the next one?
No, but I noticed that there was, nobody clicked that last one, which is good because either you got really good planning or you got really good labs. But it also is a scary one because it probably means that nobody's really planning for that. And when that can happen, it can be detrimental. And it's just as, detrimental to the business as any of the other downtime, sometimes worse. Sometimes you're in the last stretch and you've got a QA hold or third-party testing. It said, oh, there's no THC in this, it's all CBD. And you're like, well, obviously it's not. And now that everything that was banking on that going out now can't. So that, I'm glad that we have that one on there, and that it sounds like nobody's looking at it because it hasn't hit them yet. So when we dig into more of that one, that's kind of the surprising one I want to touch on.
Cool. Yeah, one of the things, Dustin, you were talking about was kind of breaking these down into those 4 buckets. Maybe you want to kind of dive into those a little more.
Yeah. And so, we've got both the 4 buckets of the 4 different types of downtime, but we've got 4 other buckets on just the all the parts of your company that downtime affects. And you really need to look at, like, so if you've got a bunch of people that are expecting, let's say we were about to send this out and we did have a hold, and let's say we needed to sell all that stuff to keep everything going, because we've got a bunch of people that are on the floor that if we can't produce on the other side, like to sell it, and let's look at and say we have a machine that went down, right? Like one of these common ones. So now you've got a bunch of guys that can't run your extractor. You still got orders coming in and going out, right? So, and then your whole thing was based on output, and right now you're outputting 0. And so the margin here is getting squashed because your costs are going through the roof across the board. And imagine if this was as simple as you didn't have enough nuts, right? You blew out your last little brass nut. Your normal supplier just happens to be out. Now nobody can get you a brass nut till tomorrow. You're out in the middle of the Saskatchewan or the Midwest or whatever, and there's no nuts anywhere near. Can't even drive to get one. It would be so silly if you lost thousands of dollars in productivity and massive cost sink because you didn't have like a $2 nut, an extra one. And so it's not just that it stopped, it's that you're losing money. You're burning money while you're down because you didn't plan far enough ahead for some downtime.
Yeah, you've got those fixed costs, and not only that, then you've got to make up for that lost time. So that usually equates to overtime, which you're paying out for more. There's also the effect that has on employee morale and everybody's oh, we got to work extra time and we got to put in these extra shifts to even just get to where we were supposed to be from that initial downtime. So these things cascade into each other, and a lot of times aren't factored into the total equation. So these are those 4 buckets that we were kind of talking about there.
Yeah. I think it's important to split them apart because that one that's the most common. Yeah, you might end up with a maintenance plan because a couple times of not having enough nuts, you're like, okay, well, we should probably get enough nuts. And then, but this is where the risk is, like, if you had it if you were just, downtime is just that, and you didn't break these other ones out, you might not build contingencies for the other ones. And I saw a lot of people also said changeover and CIP is downtime because that's downtime that you have every single time. That's always downtime. And so, like, you should plan for mechanical downtime to be the same way, really. But this one, you have to plan for the downtime there because you clean between runs, you switch stuff out, right? So now we should have a plan for that SOPs for the downtime there to optimize that. And on the other side of it too, on the supplier regularity, it's another one that having contingencies. And Matt and I talked about this, and Matt actually brought this one up, and he's like, as a equipment supplier, as someone that's trying to sell you things, on the one hand, I don't want to tell you to have contingencies, don't. But as a business operator and as somebody that's looking out for my clients, 100%, you shouldn't just rely on Evolve to be your only supplier. You maybe have them be your first because they're nice guys and they do a great job. But who knows what's happening over there? Maybe there's a wildfire or whatever. You should have a secondary supplier for these things that your business is like crucially reliant upon. So again, keeping that in a separate bucket is important because then you can plan for each one. Same for on the other side, have another lab that you're using instead of just one lab. Yeah, I think that's. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's I guess the last piece was, nobody answered in the poll, at least on the administrative side, which is something that, definitely should be on your radar. If it's not on your radar, hopefully it's on your QA department's radar, but making sure that you have contingency plans and an idea of, what are the quality standards that need to get product out the door? How do we mitigate any quality issues all the way up from where we're getting our equipment? Does it have COAs? Does it meet the standard that we want to be putting it as an input into our process, into our facility, and it's not going to cause issues downstream? So we're going to break these in, dive into these in more detail, and kind of start on the most obvious, which is that mechanical and unplanned downtime. A part goes down. Dustin used the nuts. We're down because of a 50-cent brass nut that we don't have, and we can't do up our tri-clamps. Those are easy to kind of see as obvious issues or problems that can kind of arise from not having those on site. The way we kind of look at it, and actually a client that we work with very closely, basically once you've been bitten by the downtime issue, you really start to, go down that rabbit hole and understand, look, I'm going to have to buy these parts eventually anyways. It's a much more valuable for me to have this part on my shelf ready to use when I need it, as opposed to scrambling, trying to get it when I was completely unplanned. And so it's a balance, right? You can't have every single part stacked on your shelf, but you also need to have some parts. And so identifying what are, start with some of these critical parts, understanding how much budget we should allocate to these different things. And we've got a list of different stuff that, you should at least be considering, recovery pumps, any kind of moving piece on your system that's got moving pieces inside of it. You want to have at least backup, spare parts kits or a completely redundant pump or mixer or something on site, so that you're ready to make that change as needed. But gaskets, we talked about nuts and bolts, valves, all those sorts of things. I guess the one other piece is heating and cooling infrastructure on your facility. These are extremely critical components on extraction systems. They need to be accurate. We're doing, in some cases, extremely low temperatures, medium, high temperatures, and we need them to be accurate in a lot of cases. And so these things need to be both maintained and kept up to a certain spec, but also critical parts inside of them, or even completely redundant systems. We're doing a lot of work now with groups that essentially are starting to implement completely separate redundant chilling systems that can be swapped over for either maintenance or unplanned downtime. And so, those are groups that have felt the bite of downtime and, have put associated in a number. And we're going to share some of these tools with you guys as well. So you can kind of put a number to what is a week of downtime going to cost for us, and then start assigning budgets of understanding, how much should we be investing into this to mitigate it. The next is turn changeover, CIP. Think of this as, we just had the F1 race in Washington, D.C. for America 250. We want to treat these as a pit stop. So these these are planned or should be planned, or they're at least scheduled in a sense of, these are things like cleaning the system between different lots, or swapping out our CRCs, or swapping out mulsies. These types of things are going to be happening on a certain cadence, and it's going to be different for different groups depending on how much they're processing and what they're processing. But this should be very standardized in the sense of who's doing what is the cadence of when we do this. Do we have the pieces and parts? Are these things ready? If we're doing this something, filter bags or CRC, if we're doing that in multiple times in a shift, that CRC should be ready to go and portioned out, or have a system for systematically getting that and swapping that, so we're not wasting an hour. And then also measuring and tracking, how long do these things take? Do they take an hour? Do they take 20 minutes? Where is the majority of that time happening? Are we able to cut 5-10 minutes off of that? Because that, extrapolated over a month, a year of processing is a bunch of revenue that you're leaving on the table. And then lastly, supplier supply irregularity. This is one of the things that we've kind of summed up into, reliability starts with the right supplier, but resilience requires a backup plan, and that goes for not only you guys as processors and leaning on vendors that are going to supply you with these parts and consumables, but also for your vendor that you're getting those supplies from. They need to have a diversified supply chain so that they also can get a lot of these components that aren't manufacturing, but they have a supply to make sure that you are supplied. And this is a very important piece to understand, that there's a difference between a vendor and a partner. A vendor is just going to be transactional and kind of sell you the part as you need it. Whereas, what we tried at Evolve tried to kind of provide is a more holistic service, where we want to understand your business. We want to help point out where can we provide more components and keep you operational, and what things should we be keeping an eye out for to make sure that we can keep you operational. The other thing is cash flow. So, this is a big one. For cash flow is king, right? Being able to have a vendor that at least can offer terms. Maybe you won't qualify for them. Maybe you will. Hopefully you will. But the idea is that cash flow, you should not, your PO should not be held up because of a payment waiting to clear or something like that. We need to get these cadences and this flow out to you guys as quickly as possible. I'll hand this over to you, Dustin. Administrative downtime.
Yeah. So with all the other ones, you've got an owner of the thing, right? There's somebody that's kind of in charge of it. When you hit a QA hold, you have maybe even a group of people that are releasing it. You may not have even planned for this, and it might sit on somebody's desk for just as long as waiting for a part. And it's obvious that any of these things might cause some downtime, but what's not obvious is how we track that, and then how we can do our math as a business owner on that. And that's really important. So we need to jump into the other side, and sorry, kid decided that was the time to come join us. So we need to move into tracking it, and so we excuse me, I'm so sorry. Hey, give me 1 second, I'll come help you, okay? Give me just 1 second.
This is a topic that is a very in-depth. Obviously, if you are a part of it, if you're joining us and your role is on QA, we do have a complete other webinar that dives into this in much more detail. So if you're interested in seeing that webinar, if you weren't able to attend that webinar, just click QA in the question tab and we'll make sure we get you that recording. But pass that over back to Dustin now.
Yeah, so, just first and foremost, start tracking it. Anytime you have administrative downtime for any of these 4 reasons, you should have some sort of record of that, because I know most labs that I work with never even thought of recording that. And again, it's important towards keeping proper financial record of our company. But there's more reason to keep track of it is, do you have a SLA with your lab that you test with? Do you have an agreement? Do they tell you like it will be here in this amount of time? And if it's not, what's the reconciliation for that? And so if you keep that, what I suggest if you don't have that is you keep a couple months of data on the turnaround time with your labs, and then you go shop them with other labs and say, hey, can you beat this? And get a service language agreement with them, and hold these labs accountable, right? And that's when we talk about this administrative downtime, almost always where I've seen it is when a processing facility is dealing with a QA lab or like, an analytical lab, and the labs can get squirrely. If you're new to this, they can be your worst enemy sometimes. And so holding them accountable to prevent as much of this administrative downtime is crucial.
Absolutely. Dustin, you want to talk about a little bit how cut downtime should be calculated, or some of the things that are overlooked?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really just up top. Number one is what you didn't earn. And then number two down below is what you had to keep spending. So this is all the hash that you didn't make, and this is all the power that you still were paying to keep the lights on and have all the people standing around doing nothing. And when you put that together, you get this contribution margin kind of, which is, revenue minus the costs you would have incurred if you had been running. And so, the fixed overhead doesn't stop. Lease, utilities, depreciation, compliance, security, all of it's still going. But that's now spread over fewer grams produced. So your unit cost rises on every gram that you do make that month, because that cost is being amortized over all the grams of the whole month. So now the whole month got more expensive, not just that one day where you couldn't run. And that every minute of downtime, you need to calculate the same way as a business owner. And I think that's the real key to this. And this is kind of the start and the high level to the math that's involved in this calculator that we're going to share with you guys at the end of the call. So you can really put this into action and help visualize this in your own company.
Yeah, a few other things I want to add there. Other things like knock-on effects upstream and downstream of, how downtime can affect, upstream. Let's say you have a certain amount of crop coming down, or potentially you're buying or tolling. If those vendors upstream can't rely on you, or you've got a certain amount of fresh frozen, you've got a certain amount of freezer space, and all of a sudden you're down for a week or two, not only is it all of that downtime cost for not being able to process and all of those fixed costs, where are you putting that biomass? That's going to start going bad. We need more freezer space. Stuff's potentially going to go bad. We're going to have to delay harvest. And then likewise downstream, if we need to get products out onto the shelf and we're not unable to meet the client demand, if a client comes into the store and your product is not on the shelf, they get you the competitor's product, that might be they might not come back to your product. They might find something else. You've given them a reason to go somewhere else. And so there's these other knock-on effects that are upstream and downstream of just the initial downtime cost that's being calculated. So, I think the tip of the iceberg analogy kind of gets overplayed a lot, but realistically, this is what we're talking about here. The tip of the iceberg is the immediate downtime costs that we've been talking about that kind of got highlighted in that poll question. But there's all of these other knock-on effects. And, an example that we'd like to kind of share with you is a client that it was actually before they started working with us. I won't mention any names, but they were running a system. They had a recovery pump running an active hydrocarbon system. They knew that their compressor was on its last legs, but had figured, hey, you know what? Our vendor has it. We will contact them when the thing goes out. And lo and behold, the compressor breaks, on a Friday afternoon of all times. And so they get on the phone, hey, we need a compressor on Monday. Are you able to get us this pump? And their vendor was like, no, there's a lead time from upstream from the manufacturer. We're not able to get you this pump. There's like a 2 or 3 week lead time. Well, 2 or 3 weeks, that's not going to be, so they're panic calling on the phone, trying to find another vendor that's going to be able to get them this pump. They were able to find another vendor to get them the pump, but it was still a 5-day lead time. So now this $7,500 pump turns into a week of downtime and all the knock-on effects. And so that's where these numbers are sort of derived from. This is an example scenario. This customer is running about 300 pounds a day through their hydrocarbon system, and 50 hours of downtime. They're running 10-hour shifts, 5 days of downtime. There's the cost of the pump, which was about 7,500 in this case, which equaled, we basically took a $7,500 investment that they had to outlay anyways to get this replacement pump, but it turned into a $113,000 problem. So they could have mitigated, and that's just, some of the most obvious stuff too. There's other knock-on effects upstream and downstream, overtime, the stress that it was caused, everybody's scrambling around trying to find everything. And so these are things that are very much overlooked. And, how would you rather spend $7,500 and avoid all that stress, or spend $113,000 and have all the stress? And so this kind of is just a way to kind of highlight an example of how a certain component, this could have been a $2 nut, as the example that we talked for even more of a show, right? Like a $2 nut could have had this same effect if you were unable to find that, or a $25 gasket or a $50 gasket, right? So these are the things that you need to start thinking about. The market the industry is getting compressed, right? We need to squeeze more juice, and so this is low hanging fruit for us to be able to make sure that we can mitigate any of these additional costs that nobody wants to incur.
And look, guys, Matt would love for you to go and buy 2 of every single pump for sure. But like, I would argue what you should start with is a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And the 30-day plan is super easy. All I want you to do, and we're going to give you the link to this little log that we built to make this as easy as possible, but you could literally have a clipboard and a piece of paper and write down every single time there's downtime. Follow the directions here. And just for the next 30 days, log all of that. That's all you have to do. Oh, except for if you don't have extra nuts and bolts for your hydrocarbon machine, like just go right now and go put those in your cart. That's ridiculous. Like an experienced operator, if they've got on their shelf a bag full of nuts and like those nuts and bolts for those tri-clamps. Really, you don't want a $2 nut and bolt to like stop you from your run. That's craziness. But don't go out and buy a bunch more pumps right now. Just log what you're having, and then on day 31, look back through your logs, and you can start to really quickly figure out, okay, here's the order of things. Like nuts wear out all the time, so it makes sense to have a lot of them. They're cheap. That's a really easy one. Pumps wear out sometimes. They're expensive. Maybe that's on the list, but I don't know if I can afford one. So like, what are the critical parts and how much do they cost, and can I afford, and can I plan to start stockpiling these things, and then establish the minimum stock level of how many of these things, like one extra pump's probably fine for now, lots of extra nuts and bolts because they're so cheap, and then make sure you have reorder points set for those things. And again, make sure you have backup vendors for these things, because if that extra one happens to break and I call my guy and he says there's a lead time, what am I going to do then? But
also having these discussions with your vendor to help plan some of these things as well. So if you can share these plans with that, a vendor like us, maybe not every vendor will provide a service like that, but if you're able to share this and give us some kind of a forecast and saying, hey, maybe this isn't a part that I can stock on my shelf, but I foresee me needing a new pump in this type of a time frame. And if we have a few customers that it's like, okay, we should also plan our stock so that we can, make sure that there's a seamless shipment of these critical parts as well. So that communication is super important.
And so after you completed the 60-day, the plan through up to day 90, then on 90, that's when I suggest you start looking into the minutia of improving. And a lot of this has to do with downtime that you're always experiencing, changeovers, CIP, maintenance schedules, any of this recurring downtime. Start really focusing on how we can improve that, right? Like these are going to help you avoid the catastrophic unplanned, and these are going to help you improve the constant, always happening planned. Yeah, so as I was saying, we've got these two different files that we're going to share with you. Let's see if this should work. I'll show you just the calculator. Here we go. So we've got this calculator for you guys. Um, and it's really so we can go in here. We've got a couple presets. Feel free to play around with it. It's a little weird with this screen share app that we're using. Um, is it? It looks okay on there. It's weird on my screen. But you go through here, fill this out for your company, and it's going to kind of give you a kick out of how that works. But we've got a what's the way that they can get that? Just drop in the chat,
Yeah, put
or
in the
everybody's
chat
going
if
to
you're
get emailed?
interested. These will be available on our website at some point, but we want to make sure that we get these tools out to you. So for either the calculator or the log, the 306090 log, if you want to just tick in the question section of the tab, just type whichever one you want or both, and we'll make sure to get you over a link to both the calculator and the 306090 log. So if you want to put that into the chat, we'll make sure to get those over to you guys and you can play around with them. So that leaves us kind of at the end here. There are some questions in the question tab that we left to this portion of the webinar. So maybe I'll go through some of these and we can get them answered. Let me make sure I'm going from the bottom to the top. We got one, does the crystallizer PLC track hours of use? Is this a common method for tracking and planning maintenance, and would be great feature for that custom controller? Short answer is yes. So what she's referring to here is on our crystallizer, we have our heat cool automated package. And it data logs sort of everything on the system. And that is actually a really great way to both collect data for processing and optimizing your process flow, but also for maintenance schedules and stuff like that. There also are continual upgrades on that software program that are being updated all the time. Hopefully that answered that question. What else have we got here? We got I respectfully disagree with the admin delays, at least one QA and third-party testing. Why? Because both are part of the operation. QA, QC tagging a hold on a batch usually means step on the extraction was not properly done and came up likely at the end caught by QA, QC. Also, the testing is part of the compliance and as such part of the operation process. Documentation, printing out forms, that's another story. Those are delays. Dustin, you want to comment on that? If there is anything.
I mean, in general, I think I agree with what he's saying. The one being that the labs often will just be wrong because they're labs and they're under crazy constraints themselves and they make mistakes that are unplanned for that are definitely delays. Like the reason I said it all came back CVD is because I've seen that one multiple times where COA comes back and it's like, yeah, passed, and it's 20% CVD, and you're like, what are you talking about? There's no CVD anywhere near, and who knows what they did wrong over there, mixed it up, but that now is like there's a delay there where I've got to get back a hold of the lab, say you just sent me a COA back with that says this THC is CVD. It's not, and you need to rerun it, and then the next day they're like, oh yeah, you're right, it is all THC. I'm just like, great. So that was a delay, and I guess you could say that's part of the game, which it truly is, but it's a I don't know. I guess we're arguing semantics on what's a delay or not.
What else do we got here? We got some actual questions on product. I'll maybe skip over those. Using an accredited 17025 lab reduces the changes of those mistakes. I'm not sure if that's, I'm not familiar with that. Are you?
Yeah. Just not using shitty labs will definitely be give you better outcome. In Canada, you guys are much more rigorous and scientific. Some of the Wild West stuff down here in the United States is just labs has constantly been a contention point for the U.S.
Well, there's
cannabis
contention
processor.
here as well. I think labs, there's a whole, yeah. I mean, labs are incentivized to give you good results, and so you keep coming back, and there's no real policing or
Right.
oversight.
And the business model is crazy. Like it's now how many of these can we get through a day to make our numbers, not like how scientific can we be, how accurate can we be. And so even if you're the most accredited lab in the world, that economic dynamic still impacts how a lab operates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't miss Todd Pickleson. He had a question about an evaporator.
Yeah, I see that guy. Do you guys have an evaporator solution, 12 to 15 minutes per minute or per minute range? Looking to set up recovery, but we're limited with power. Any creative solutions to offer? I'm assuming you're talking about hydrocarbon, but you might be talking about ethanol. We do have some solutions that be happy to reach out to you, and we can kind of showcase what we got. Potentially even use some existing equipment that you've got to help lower the costs. The initial
like a wood-fired boiler. Where are you at? Yeah, somewhere. Right. Yeah, the boonies of Canada. He's got plenty of logs, but no power. Like we're running with fire, boys.
Cool. Okay, here's another one. What would you say is the biggest hidden risk to the business in downtime?
Hidden risk, it's got to be those little nuts. Like, I think a lot of people, I know for a fact, Murphy taught me this one, that a lot of people, and I started looking when she pointed it out, and it's now this little thing every time I'm in a lab. If I see that you're running a hydrocarbon extractor and you don't have extra nuts and bolts, that's the biggest hidden risk, is that little, $2 part combined can shut the whole shop down. You could be, if you if you just don't have enough of them, you're screwed. One little tiny 30-cent nut and you're offline. So that probably is the biggest hidden risk right there. Like you could in your mind think about, oh, if this pump didn't work, the whole thing would be. That's not really hidden. You think about that kind of like, damn, the whole thing was relying on this. What you don't think about is that last brass nut.
Yeah, Murphy commented here, running a strip nut can literally end your life.
That's right. You're going to put it together. It's the last one, and you strip it, and you go look, and your part's thin. You got none. Uh-oh.
Exactly. Yeah, and to further to that, like, I guess it's not actual downtime, but like we talked a little bit about the CIP and the kind of the pit stop example. Ergonomics, like having things set up so that you can shave time off. It's not actual downtime, but if it's something it takes you 10 minutes, you can actually do in 5 minutes because your tools are properly organized, your wrenches as an example, or you've got the things that you need before you take some time at the beginning of the shift to get all the things in order so that you know exactly where they are and you're able to shave off that time. It's not specifically tied to downtime, but if you're able to shave off 5 minutes every shift over a year, that might equal a whole other shift. And so essentially that is downtime. It's just, little bits at a time. So systemizing things so that you are able to get more done in less time. And usually it's little things, a minute there, 2 minutes, 2 minutes here, that can make all the difference in the work.
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt, in the sense that is actually hidden downtime. People don't look at that as, they don't count it in the same as downtime buckets. So it's hidden just in the sense that you're not even looking at it. You're looking right through it. And you're right, that is downtime. So that probably is the biggest hidden one, is all those lost seconds.
Yeah. One more, that's true, but it reflects the lack of preventative maintenance program. Yeah. Preventive maintenance is huge. That's another one, right? You don't fix the pump when it's broken. You have a plan for when the pump should be fixed, when, between shifts, right? Hey, we're going to do this every month. We're going to do this every quarter. We're going to do this every 6 months. Whether it's broken or not, we know that it's a piece that's going to wear out. Maybe we don't know exactly when, but that understanding, what is the expected lifespan of a certain product, and cutting that back so that we've got that a bit of buffer between when it actually conks out and you do the swap out, because that can save a lot of time and cost as well.
Yeah, well, and to Murphy's point, your life, a strip nut, I reread it, and a strip nut can literally end your life, and she's not wrong. Your nuts have a service lifespan, and if you're at that last second of it, right when the thing's at 100 psi or whatever it is, because you got some crazy propane blend or whatever kind of crazy stuff you're running in there, that thing coming off then is deadly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it looks like that is pretty much all of the questions. Hopefully I didn't miss any here. I'm just scanning through. If we did, I'll make sure to get your response to any of these questions. Do you have anything else to add, Dustin, before we hop off?
No, just, like I said, go back to that 30, 60, 90. And if you don't take anything else from this, just go back and write down some of your downtime, so you have an idea. Like, if nobody's ever written down downtime or logged it in your company, be the guy that does it. Doesn't matter if this is your lab or just one that you work in, like, still record any downtimes. It's valuable information to the company that you either own or work for. So either way, use that.
Yeah, I've seen a few come in just to make sure. Just a reminder, guys, if you want a link to both the calculator and that 30, 60, 90 log, just write either calculator or log in the question box, and we'll make sure to get one of them over to you, a link over, so you can start playing with those tools, because I think they're really powerful. And we might have one other question here before we go. A pump tells you well in advance that it's failing and that it's about to fail or good. It makes friction noises, it's cavitation noises, it leaks, it body heats up, it shakes. It's telling you, I need PM. Yeah. So listen to those components and fix them before they're actually fully broken, and keep up on different maintenance and cleaning schedules.
Yeah, that's it. It's an interesting thing, just as a little nuance, as a lab operator, you're in this sound environment that's very, like, repetitive. And so you become hyper tuned to any slight changes. It's like if you drive your car long enough, the second it's like a little weird, you notice, that's the sign, like he's saying, to, hey, something needs maintenance here. Something has changed.
Yeah. Well, and further to that, like, even looking and designing your system, like if you're looking to, improve your system and you're looking at various different options, look at things that kind of no longer use components that can go bad. So a great example of this is, an active systems compressor or recovery pump, right? A passive system, you no longer have that working piece or that moving piece that needs to be worked out. Yes, you've got to, make sure now that our chilling and our heating infrastructure is sized and maintenance is carried out there. But looking at your system and optimizing it for removing some of these, maybe legacy type pieces that were initially launched out with some of these hydrocarbon or other extraction systems, and look at ways of finding components or process flows that don't require replacement of parts. If you don't have to, open a vessel up and strip your nuts and still get the same results, that's a better system. If you don't have all these quick connects that are going to leak and do all this stuff, and everything's hard piped, much better solution, right? You're not going to have those maintenance things. So looking at your overall process flow and understanding, how do we minimize any of the wear and tear type components off of the system and make it as resilient as possible. That's pretty much it. Thanks everybody for joining us today. If you guys have any other questions, after you get off the webinar link, be sure to, you can get in touch with me at matt@evolvedextraction.com. I've also, my IG handle is Genome Evolver. Feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to, go into detail of some more ways of preventative maintenance and avoiding downtime. And yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.